Welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Joining me now is Scott Mendelson, a Forbes entertainment analyst and box office pundit. Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Of course, so we made it. It is Friday, which means new releases at the box office. What can people see this weekend at the movies?
The primary new release is 20th Century Studios' Barbarian, which is an original horror film about a young woman whose Airbnb or B&B gets double booked. And no spoilers because the marketing's been very cryptic, but there's
Yes.
something finicky going on in the basement.
I saw that. Do you think it's too early for studios to be releasing horror movies, or is Labor Day never? They're always in style.
Always in style. If anything, I would say that theatrical horror pictures almost single-handedly has kept the box office or the theatrical industry alive, both in the earlier days of COVID and during, in between various blockbuster releases. Just last summer we had Candyman, Spiral, The Forever Purge, Don't Breathe 2, Escape Room Tournament of Champions. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of those. A Quiet Place Part 2, which made almost $300 million. That was the film that frankly convinced me that, okay, tentpoles are back. Because that was a film that it had been delayed by 14 months and it opened in May of 2020 with numbers almost identical to what it was tracking at before COVID. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It made $200 million on a 39 budget in that same summer. M. Night Shyamalan's Old did very well. And throughout the last 2 years, we have seen a number of high profile and lower profile horror success stories. For example, A24 released Ty West's critically acclaimed X. It is a 1970s set slasher picture set in a farmhouse porn set. The film still made $11 million domestic, which I would argue is pretty good for an original R-rated movie set on a porn set. It's a very good movie. There's a certain melancholy that I was not expecting. It's very sincere. It's surprisingly emotional. And if you rent it and like it, there's a prequel to that film opening, I think, next week in semi-wide release called Pearl. And without going into details that would give away X or Pearl, that is a prequel to the film.
That's a prequel.
Both of them at the same time.
Oh, I did not know that was a prequel. That's the one with the girl on the farm, right? And she wants to be an actress. Oh, that looks terrifying. I saw some previews for that. That looks terrifying.
So yeah, Barbarian, I don't think it's going to blow open the doors box office wise, because again, it's still a star-free, original, hardcore horror picture. But the buzz has been out for a while. Disney screened it at the San Diego Comic-Con earlier this year, and they've been screening it pretty early to get the word out. But for a movie like that, 10 million bucks would be a triumph. It was not an expensive picture. It might be leggy just because it's the only game in town for a while. And in a rational world, absent COVID-related post-production delays, the big movie this weekend was supposed to be New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers' Salem's Lot, which is an adaptation of Stephen King's classic novel about vampires in a small town. So either way, we were going to get a horror film this weekend.
And why was Salem's Lot bumped?
Production delays related to COVID post-production hiccups. Same reason as Black Adam. It is unfortunately, does not have a release date at this point. But to my knowledge, that has nothing to do with the quality of the picture or any concerns about marketing. I did see a trailer at this year's CinemaCon and it played fine.
So you were saying that it's always a good time to release a horror movie. I was looking to see any new releases out this weekend. In select theaters and on streaming is a movie called About Fate, and it's an engagement wedding movie set place on New Year's Eve. Why? What is the rationale behind that being a rom-com being released in September? It reads more like a holiday movie.
Honestly, when it comes to home video / VOD, I'll be honest, I don't know the thinking. I mean, I'm good at, in terms of theatrical releases and why you release what and when, but for something on streaming, I think it's just a matter of keeping the content mill relatively full.
Got it.
And I know that's a terrible answer, so I apologize.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. because I would still watch it. So,
Fair.
of course.
And yeah, I mean, we've obviously had a lack of big scale or even mid-budget rom-coms in theaters over the last several years. But Netflix has frankly picked up the slack because that's sort of the one Hollywood-like genre that, because they're relatively inexpensive, because they're character and dialogue driven and high concept, that they can make streaming romantic comedies that generally approximate the genuine Hollywood article. I know they had their Summer of Love back in 2018, where they had, To All the Boys I Love, Set It Up, The Kissing Booth, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that theatrical romantic comedies have been better at spawning franchises for Netflix than a lot of their big budget stuff.
That's true. That is true. So, do you think that Barbarian will be the winner at the box office this week simply because there's not too many other options?
Yeah, by default, I think so. It did about 850,000 in Thursday previews, which, if it plays like a normal movie, which does 10% of the weekend, the Thursday numbers account for around 10% of the overall weekend box office, then you're looking at around 8.5 million for the weekend, which isn't spectacular. It's possible that good buzz and general interest could fuel walk-ins to maybe get it over 10 million, but I don't think we're looking at a giant breakout smash here. But I don't think we ever were. 10 would have been good, 15 would have been a miracle.
And new release or not, what are you recommending? If someone can only see one movie this weekend, what are you recommending they see?
Barbarian, so I have something good to write about this weekend.
Good. Well, I'm good news. I'm going to see it on Sunday, so we can talk about it Monday.
Fair enough.
So, Scott, last week we talked about Marvel releasing 2 movies that performed pretty well over the summer. So, there was online chatter, though, despite that Marvel was in trouble. Can you explain that?
Well, a lot of it is just people trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. I think pretty much all of Marvel's quote unquote box office problems are related to the films not playing in China and Russia, which in a 3-4 years ago, that would have been good for another 120 to 160 million in global grosses. Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness made 955. If you throw in China and Russia, that's around $1.1 billion. And I don't think anybody would be saying, oh no, it's a bomb because it didn't top $1 billion or whatever nonsense you're hearing. Same thing with Thor: Love and Thunder. The Thor Ragnarok made 854 in worldwide in 2017. You take away China and Russia, that's 712 million. Now, Thor: Love and Thunder, which again did not play in Russia and China, has made 750 million worldwide. So in quote unquote like for like market comparisons, it's outgrossed Thor Ragnarok in North America and worldwide. And there's not a lot of part fours. There's not a lot of franchises at all that you have 4 installments that came out relatively, it's not like a 10, 20-year gap for a legacy sequel or whatever, where you had part 1, and then part 2 made more money, part 3 made more money, and then part 4 made more money. Mm-hmm. If John Wick Chapter 4 makes a little bit more money than John Wick Chapter 3, Lionsgate will be pretty happy.
And obviously, these movies aren't playing in Russia because of Russia's war on Ukraine. But can you elaborate on why they're not playing in China?
A lot of that is speculation, but they have not been given approval in China. And considering some of the frankly goofy reasons that we've heard, like, for example, allegedly Spider-Man No Way Home did not play in China because there were too many shots of the Statue of Liberty in the film's climax. Now, my unofficial opinion is that they just don't want Marvel movies in China, whether it's because they want to stick it to Disney or because they don't want the competition. Whatever the reason is, it's not happening. They haven't played a movie in China since Spider-Man Far From Home earned a terrific 199 million in China in the summer of 2019. And that helped that film get to 1.13 billion worldwide. Now that 199 total was a 71% bump from what Spider-Man Homecoming earned in 2017. That same summer, the Avengers Endgame earned a record for a Hollywood movie, 620 million in China alone. That was a 71% bump from Avengers Infinity War and was single-handedly responsible for Avengers Endgame making just enough worldwide to temporarily crawl past Avatar at the global box office. But then in early 2021, Avatar was re-released in China, earned another 55 million in China, and took the global crown back.
Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Spider Man Far From Home soaring past this 1 billion threshold, you believe gave the expectation that every other MCU movie was going to beat that. Do you think, why can other MCU movies surpass this number? Is it solely because they're not playing in China?
Well, I think that variable is a factor. When you're 100 million off, you're 100 million off. The other thing is, prior to Black Panther, there was a ceiling for Marvel movies that did not feature Spider-Man and did not feature Iron Man. And that ceiling was, as of late 2017, the $869 million gross of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. That included about 100, 115 in China. And that was considered a full-blown breakout sequel because everybody loved the first Guardians of the Galaxy. So it boggles my mind that people are looking at Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and people like Doctor Strange, but I don't think it was held up as one of the great ones. It was a solid picture, and it made 677 million worldwide in 2016. Now you take away China and Russia, that's, I think, 585, give or take. So you had a 71% jump in like-for-like market share, market grosses between Doctor Strange 1 and Doctor Strange 2. Any other franchise on Earth would soil their britches to get a 71% jump in global grosses.
But for Marvel, it's just not enough, it seems.
Well, I think that one of the big problems is that the way Marvel is discussed now versus the way it was even 3 or 4 years ago, they're not the underdog anymore. Mm-hmm. They're not the scrappy little engine that could. They've taken over pop culture as we know it. They're basically the closest thing we have to a theatrical and television monoculture, to the extent that it's something that everybody participates in. I think the television shows create the illusion that there's too much Marvel out there. Most general audiences see the movies, but they don't watch all the TV shows. Just in the same way, most comic book fans, just because you say you're a Marvel fan doesn't mean you read every single Marvel comic book that releases week in and week out. The people make subjective choices about what they're interested in. But if you're a media pundit or you're a critic or you're somebody in the industry, you basically have to watch all of this stuff, whether you want to or not, relatively soon after they premiere on a weekly basis. So to you, yes, you might be suffering from Marvel overload because you have to watch the stuff, whether you like Moon Knight or not.
You wrote for Forbes that you believe that Marvel now faces the same challenges that DC faced. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. One of the biggest advantages that Marvel had when they started in 2008, all the way up through 2011, 2012, was that comic book films, superhero comic book films, were expected to earn a lot less money than they are now. Iron Man started with 585 million worldwide. That was less than Mamma Mia. That was less than Kung Fu Panda that same summer. That was less than Will Smith's original Hancock that summer, which made $625 million worldwide. Even going into 2011, Thor was considered an unmitigated hit, earning $449 million worldwide. Captain America, the First Avenger, earned $376 million, which back then was an unmitigated hit. And they got extra credit just because, wow, a movie with the word America in the title did so well overseas. That's terrific. Now, to put that on par, that was about what Star Trek did. That was about what Batman Begins did. That was about what Tron earned. And that's about what Superman Returns earned. So comic book superhero films, unless they were about Spider-Man or unless they featured Wolverine, were not expected to earn a gazillion dollars. But then the Avengers comes along, makes 1.5 billion worldwide, and the game gets changed. Now you have Man of Steel that is expected to, and frankly, I think Warner Brothers, the various executives at Warner Brothers at the time made a terrible mistake by saying publicly, "Oh, we expect Harry Potter numbers." That's a paraphrase. They said, it's going to perform about on par with the Harry Potter films. Even if you're not looking at, Deathly Hallows Part 2, which made 1.3 billion worldwide in 2011, pretty much every Harry Potter film made between 850 and 950 million dollars worldwide. So that puts a target on the back of Man of Steel's back. So when it only makes $668 million, along with mixed reviews, divisive reception among general audience, and massive front loading, that creates the impression that the film is a disappointment and not the proverbial Iron Man or Batman Begins that they wanted out of the gate.
Do you think that these franchises, both MCU and DC, have changed the industry forever?
Yes. I think the films that Disney and Universal, Jurassic, Fast and Furious, Minions, released over the last 7 years have normalized the notion of the billion-dollar grosser. So now people that frankly don't know what often people that don't know what they're talking about expect every big movie to automatically make $1 billion, even if there's no good reason to expect that off the cuff. The Batman didn't need to gross $1 billion. Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness didn't need to gross $1 billion. Wonder Woman 84, I would argue, was never going to make $1 billion. The first one made 817 million, or excuse me, 821 worldwide. The sequel was almost always going to make less in North America, maybe more overseas, with a global gross basically on par with the first film. That's what we often see in sequels that aren't breakout sequels, like Kingsman, the Golden Circle, Star Trek Into Darkness, Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows.
So, are we going to see another MCU movie pass this billion-dollar threshold anytime soon or at all?
I would be surprised if Wakanda Forever did not pull $1 billion, just because everybody loved the first one. It was incredibly leggy, which means people discovered it long after opening weekend. It was, I believe, and this is anecdotal, I don't know if this is, I have heard that it was the most not watched movie on Netflix in 2018, back when Netflix had the rights to the Disney Marvel movies. So there's plenty of people that loved Black Panther in 2018 and have spent the last 4 years waiting for a sequel. The unfortunate death of Chadwick Boseman creates a certain newsworthiness that makes it more than just a big sequel to a big blockbuster, in the same way that the death of Heath Ledger and the death of Paul Walker made respectively The Dark Knight and Furious 7 more explicitly newsworthy events. Now, that being said, it is entirely possible that Wakanda Forever could take a normal sequel dive and only make as much as, say, only make as much as 905 million worldwide, because you won't have China, you might not have Russia, and that level of drop would be equal to what happened with Jurassic World versus Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom made 1.3 billion worldwide versus Jurassic World, which made 1.67 billion worldwide. You take that equal level of a drop, you take out China, you take out Russia, versus Black Panther, which made $1.346 billion, and you have 905 million worldwide. If that happens, I do not want to hear any mumbo jumbo about, Black Panther is a disappointment because it only made $900 million.
Because that's a success anywhere else.
Any rational standard, that's a success. Look, as far as the whole Marvel in trouble shenanigans, if Wakanda Forever only makes $600 million, then you can panic. If Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 makes $600 million, then you can panic. Otherwise, these films are performing basically up to par.
So I now want to discuss news from the DC universe that broke this week, and that was CNBC reported Dan Lin, who produced the Lego movie, isn't taking the DC film and TV chief role at Warner Brothers. It was also reported earlier in the year that Emma Watts, who was a former executive at Paramount and 20th Century Studios, didn't take the job in the spring. So why is this job so hard to fill?
Well, I don't want to presuppose. I think some of Dan Lin's obstacles were related to a production company that he currently owns and the financial shenanigans regarding that. That being said, I'm not sure it's a job that anyone would want.
Why?
And, a super quick history of the DC universe since 2013. They come out of the gate saying, we want a cinematic universe like what the MCU has. Zack Snyder is going to be our architect. It's going to be dark. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be a deconstructionist, mythological plot over character universe. It's going to be something different than what Marvel does. All due respect, and without getting into the discourse, it doesn't work. Man of Steel is a severely front-loaded film, only makes 668 worldwide. Domestically, it made 291, which means while Superman Returns made 206 in 2006, that means it only sold 15% more tickets than Superman Returns. which can mostly be chalked up to the 3D bump, because in IMAX, which was not a mainstream thing in 2006, and generalized curiosity over the notion of a Chris Nolan produced Superman movie. Then, 2.5 years later, Batman v Superman was supposed to be the backdoor pilot of the entire DC universe. It gets terrible reviews. It becomes the most front-loaded movie ever to open above $100 million. It makes $873 million worldwide, 330 domestic, objectively strong numbers, but off of a $424 million global opening weekend. And then they, react to that by finagling Suicide Squad into something it was never supposed to be. It was pitched and conceived as sort of a David Ayer film, which means Fast and the Furious meets superheroes. Because of the reception to Batman v Superman, because of the reception to Deadpool, because of the reception to Guardians of the Galaxy, it was retroactively reconfigured by the studio into a terribly reviewed and relatively indifferent received movie that still was a hit because it was a big superhero movie starring Will Smith. That was a huge boon overseas. It was the first appearance in live action of Harley Quinn. The film still makes 325 domestic and 745 worldwide. However, Justice League opens in November of 2017, having been completely recombobulated at the request of the studio. Zack Snyder snaps down, allegedly after a loss in the family, but it's clear they were not seeing eye to eye in terms of what Snyder wanted to do versus what Warner Brothers wanted. Warner Brothers basically wanted a diet Avengers. So they bring on Joss Whedon to give them a diet Avengers. Unfortunately, we've already had the Avengers. We've had 2 Avengers films between 2012 and 2015. So when Justice League comes out as just a diet Avengers, audiences are like,
we want the real thing. Yeah.
And that's often the problem with Hollywood trying to replicate the success of the MCU. They try to offer, it's King Arthur, but it's a superhero film. It's The Mummy, but it's a superhero film. It's Solo, a Star Wars story, which is kind of a superhero film. And what do we know about politics when Democrats run as kind of sort of Republicans in red states to try to win in the midterm elections? People say, why would I vote for this diet Republican who I know isn't sincere because I know they're a Democrat, when I can just vote for the genuine article and vote for a Republican?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So do you think that the right person in this role could help DC see the success that Marvel sees?
Well, here's the problem. They had the right guy. After Justice League underwhelmed with $659 million on a $300 million budget, they brought in Walter Hamada from New Line, and he was best known as the guy that helped turn The Conjuring into the first, and I would argue only, unmitigatedly successful post-Avengers cinematic universe. Those films were a series of interconnected but loosely connected, R-rated period piece religious horror films that have made $2 billion worldwide over 7 or 8 films.
And I've seen every single one.
Yeah, Warner Brothers will yell at me if I count The Curse of La Llorona as a Conjuring film, but who are we kidding? But anyway, and under his tutelage, we get Aquaman, which was still in development, before he came on, but I'm pretty sure he and James Wan will see eye to eye on most things. That film made $1.148 billion in late 2018. Shazam earned good reviews and 360 worldwide on a 90 budget. Joker made $1 billion on a $65 million budget, won 4 Oscars, got a Best Picture nomination, became the biggest grossing R-rated movie of all time, and is still the 3rd biggest no China, no problem box office grosser of all time. So it's the 3rd biggest movie behind Top Gun Maverick and Spider-Man No Way Home to never play in China. And absent COVID, Wonder Woman 84 would have been a solid hit. Again, I don't think it would have done $1 billion, but I think 650 to 750 was pretty safe. The Batman would have been a critically acclaimed box office smash, which it still turned out to be. Mm-hmm. I still think the Suicide Squad was probably doomed because you were making a sequel to a movie that wasn't all that well received the first time, without Will Smith, without Batman, without the Joker. And those are 3 of the big elements that helped make that film a hit the first time around. That being said, it was a good movie. It did get good reviews, and Warner Brothers would have gotten some extra credit for getting James Gunn and giving him $180 million to make basically a trauma film in the DC universe. Was that a good commercial idea? Maybe not. But would it probably have been received as a, for the love of the game, we can do what Marvel can't, ha ha ha, minor league success story? Following all of these other successes and following what I presume would have been the success of Wonder Woman 84 and the Batman. Yes. But what happened? COVID happened. COVID kneecapped Wonder Woman 1984. Jason Killer used that one as the sacrificial lamb for the year-long Project Popcorn event. That was the one big movie in late 2020 and 2021 that was offered up on HBO Max and in theaters concurrently that would have guaranteed to be a huge smash had it opened in 2020 under non-COVID circumstances. What's the other thing that happened? Jason Killer and AT&T need more HBO Max content. We're in a pandemic. Nothing's being made. So they pay Zack Snyder and friends $70 million to make a 4-hour Snyder cut of Justice League. Was the film a huge hit? No. Was it relatively well watched in terms of, and did it do what it needed to do in terms of getting HBO Max in the front of every media outlet out there and keep HBO Max at the top of the media ball game? Yes, it did. Did it keep post-production houses that were otherwise struggling open for business during the early days of the pandemic? Yes, it did. And for nothing else, that was a moral good. But first of all, it didn't get the Snyder Verse fans off Warner Brothers' back.
Wait, let's wait right there. Can we take a step back and can you explain for all of us what the Snyder Verse is?
It is a 4-hour extended cut of what I presume was going to be the 2.5 to 3 hour theatrical cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League that he had on a computer and took with him when he left the Warner Brothers lot. It also needed about $70 million worth of post-production work. So the idea that it was almost finished, it was, a complete film.
You disagree. Okay.
It was, I don't want to call him a liar on the air, but it may have been, what do they call it in politics? It was a mistruth. And whatever, this is not, it's, I don't want to paint the giant corporation as a victim here.
Mm-hmm.
But so, he spends a year or whatever long, recutting and doing post-production work, musical scores and all the stuff that goes into making a movie. He goes off and shoots a new epilogue, allegedly without Warner Brothers' permission, and by default not adhering to COVID protocols, which is why Warner Brothers gets mad at him all over again, because, again, without picking a side, if somebody had gotten sick with COVID while making a Warner Brothers movie, even if Warner Brothers didn't give permission, they might have been in legal hot water.
Yeah, that's on their hands. Potentially.
So if they were still kind of grouchy, if they were still kind of at each other's throats even after the movie came out, that was a big reason why. And again, this is not a good and evil conversation.
No. And was the movie well received?
Yes, it got excellent reviews. And frankly, it is a better film than the theatrical cut. And frankly, it's a better film than the theatrical cut of Batman v Superman. Having said that, I think the extended cut of Batman v Superman, which was released on Blu-ray and with 30 minutes more additional footage, was a better picture than the theatrical cut. Do I think it would have been better received? A little bit. Do I think there exists a perfect 160-minute or ideal 160-minute version of Batman v Superman that could have played in theaters and could have been a PG-13 that probably would have been better received? Yes. That being said, do I think that there's an ideal 170-minute version of Zack Snyder's Justice League that could have played in theaters? Yes. So mistakes were made on both sides.
Got it.
My big thing with Warner Brothers is that they panicked when Man of Steel underwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, let's throw in Batman, because that's their answer to everything. Warner Brothers stands for Where's Batman? And, there are reasons to that. Between The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises in 2008 and 2012, Catwoman bombed, Jonah Hex bombed, Green Lantern bombed. So Superman Return, between Batman Begins and Superman Dark Knight, Superman Returns bombed. So there is a paper trail of non-DC, non-Batman films struggling at the box office.
Mhm.
Um, Prior to Wonder Woman, the biggest grossing non-Batman, non-Superman DC film was Keanu in the superhero film was Keanu Reeves' Constantine, which made about 240 million on a 100 budget in 2005. Um, Here's a fun full circle alert. What was the biggest DC film that wasn't Batman or Superman before Wonder Woman? It was Zack Snyder's 300, which made $457 million in early 2007.
So is Zack Snyder still with Warner Brothers?
Oh no, no.
He's separate.
And that's part of the absurdity of all the fans saying we want the Snyder Verse restored. We want, to get Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. And he's at Netflix. And as far as I know, he's pretty happy there. I mean, he's being given carte blanche to do whatever he wants. And come what may, I think Army of the Dead, which I was fortunate enough to see in a theater, is one of the few wannabe Netflix blockbusters that looks and feels like the genuine article. It's a good movie. And I hope he gets to make his, I think it's called Rebel Moon. As far as I know, it's still in production. I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn. And that's basically a giant budget original sci-fi film that's basically going to be a riff on the Seven Samurai, as was frankly the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Allegedly his two favorite films are Excalibur and Seven Samurai. And Batman v Superman is absolutely his Excalibur. And while Justice League is basically his Seven Samurai.
No, it goes back for years, and the fandom on Twitter, I know, runs very deep.
You asked me why nobody wants the DC job,
Yes.
because the discourse has seeped into the mainstream, and people, and Walter Hamada who is an Asian man, by the way. I don't know if he's Asian American or Asian Australian like James Wan, so forgive me. But he got, online death threats and the usual nonsense thrown his way because he got raised up as sort of the final boss in the Snyder Verse discourse wars. And after he came on board, the edict was, okay, we're going to stop trying to be like Marvel. We're going to do our own thing. And they did their own thing. They had loosely connected movies of all varying shapes and sizes that were relatively well received and relatively commercially successful. Then in 2021, or 2020, 2021, Jason Killer comes in of AT&T and says, okay, we're going to put all of our eggs in the HBO Max basket. That means Wonder Woman 84 gets kneecapped. That means the Suicide Squad gets kneecapped. That means they greenlight a bunch of HBO Max movies, Batgirl, Blue Beetle, etc., Wonder Twins. But then what happens? AT&T goes bye-bye. Warner Brothers gets brought in by Discovery with an entirely different corporate overlord, David Zaslav, who decides to make a completely 180-degree turn that says, oh, no, we don't want these DC films playing on HBO Max. It's theaters or nothing. Oh, and we want our own 10-year plan to copy what Marvel did. So everything that doesn't apply to that is no more. And oh, we want Walter Hamada out of there because we want our own guy. So why would anyone want to take that job when for the last several years, DC Films has constantly been besieged by differing and changing leadership with often completely different corporate goals and corporate goalposts for what constitutes success?
Seems like there's a lot of upheaval there with Batgirl getting canned. The Flash, is it coming out? David Zaslav is saying yes, but the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller is up in the air. But Scott Mendelson, thank you so much. And we will keep this conversation going next time.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to hear you. By the way, if Mr. Zaslav is listening, I'll take the job.
You heard it here first. Thank you.